they'll hear me now. Moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Ian Rabbits, that the committee reconvene in open session at 7:55. All those in favor? That is carried. Well, I got to sign it yet, sorry. So now we are going to communication. Dennis Trevally, Chair, Norfolk County PSB, Project Speed Watch. Who's got that one? Or is there one? Going back to page, go ahead, Councillor, I think it's 45, page 45.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Okay, this is a communication item,
Yes?
and if you see, check out page 47, it was moved by Van Passen, seconded by Ms. Shelley, that the Police Services Board request for funds to support the Project Speed Watch be referred to the Police Services Board for further review. Well, that did happen. It's been discussed there several times. And at each of our PSB meetings, the subject of speeding on our county roads comes up regularly from all corners of Norfolk County. And so the Police Services Board did review it again as was requested. It was not passed at the budget session, but there is a motion there on page 45 that I would put on the floor to council and committee here. Save and accept this one here. The clerk has advised me down there, the second one from the bottom on page 45. And whereas Norfolk County is in receipt of provincial offenses administration revenue to offset the acquisition of such material, be it resolved. Anyway, if that can be removed, because he says it just doesn't work that way. So the rest of it stands perfect the way it should read.
So is that whole paragraph you want out, or just part of it?
Right, the words, and whereas Norfolk County is in receipt of provincial offenses administration revenue to offset the acquisition of such material.
You want that out?
That section should be taken out, right.
Okay. So done.
I see our Inspector Varga is here. Perhaps if there's any questions or requirement to answer some of these concerns, if any councillor has a concern, perhaps he can come to the podium also.
Okay. I guess the question is this: are we going to have to get a seconder and a second first?
Well, I would think so. I will move the motion.
You'll move the motion, okay. Second member? Ian Rabbits? You can read it.
Whereas Norfolk County Council referred the Project Speed Watch recommendation back to the Norfolk County Police Services Board, and whereas Norfolk County Police Services Board has re-examined the proposal for the purchase of speed awareness signs as referred by the Norfolk County Council, and whereas excess speed continues to be an issue on Norfolk County roads, and whereas the Norfolk County Police Service Board considers that speed awareness signs will benefit in key locations within Norfolk County to promote vehicular safety, especially in school zones and built-up areas. Be it resolved that Norfolk County Council incorporates the purchase of one mobile trailer speed sign at the approximate cost of $17,000 and 6 pole-mounted speed wagons in the calendar year of 2019. I believe we need a funding source. Would it be through the council reserve, the $1 million established reserve, or?
Well, that's certainly one option,
No.
Mr. Clerk, because
No.
this is a project that benefits the whole county, across the county.
Well, that'll be for discussion, I guess. I'll just read the rest. And 6 pole-mounted solar-powered speed wagon signs per year over 5 years, an approximate cost of $7,750 per unit through the 2020 to 2023 capital budgets, and that the OPP work with Norfolk County staff to develop a comprehensive strategy for the operation, maintenance, and data collection from the deployment of the speed awareness signs, and that this recommendation be forwarded to Norfolk County Council for consideration. Well, that one's really not pertinent. We're doing that right now.
Okay. Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you go to page 51 of our agenda, I remember this very distinctly at budget time. The reason it was not approved at budget, it says in 2019 on the Safer Ontario Act of 2018, Bill 175, every municipal council will be required to prepare a community safety and well-being plan. One of the identified risk factors to address in Norfolk County's plan could be speeding as it relates to road safety, and the implementation of speed watch signage could be one of several strategies to address that risk factor. So I still haven't seen our community safety and well-being plan to know whether these signs are going to be one of the several strategies, and that's what we've been waiting for. So is something changed?
Who are we going to ask?
Well, maybe just to chime in there, I believe this should be, certainly. I think other municipalities are way ahead of us in having this kind of signage out on their roads already. So I would think that it would be appropriate to have that in the community safety and well-being plan, which we will all be responsible for and part of.
Councillor Huffman?
Thank you, Chair Geisens. I do recall this being voted down at budget time. I recall not voting in. I recall voting in favor of having them. I don't recall it being contingent upon the safety plan. That part I don't recall at all.
I think I've read the exact same paragraph at budget time.
Yeah, I know that there is a plan that needs to come forward within the next couple years, the strategic plan. But anyways, I agree with Councillor Columbus. These are all over, and they do make a difference, and we do tend to get contact from constituents on a regular basis regarding speeding in hamlets and on other roads, and I certainly think it's a wise investment.
Councillor Michelli, and then Councillor Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to sort of confirm Councillor Van Passen's question. I do agree that these are very useful items and are probably going to be a big benefit to the county. Speeding is definitely a problem, but I'm just a bit concerned about the requirement to have a plan and then have something be part of the plan, but without a plan, I just think we're kind of going at this in a little bit of a backwards fashion. I would like to see the plan, and then we can put together a really good package for all of these safety items. Thank you.
Yes, Mayor Chop?
I would be in support of them for this year. I think that we have seen so many cases come forward where they obviously would be a benefit in a number of areas throughout Norfolk County. The only concern that I do have is the number of them. I think that number works out to something like 5 speed watch signs by the end of 5 years in each ward across Norfolk County, and I'm just not sure that I can justify that number. So I was wondering if we might be able to have a division of the question with the last paragraph, that the Norfolk County Police Services Board recommends that the County Council incorporates the purchase of 1 mobile trailer speed sign at an approximate cost of $17,000 and 6 pole-mounted speed watch signs in the calendar year 2019, and then we divide it there for the future budgets, the 20 to 23 capital budgets. And then to Councillor Van Passen's point, once we get that community safety plan, then I'm more than happy for us to revisit it at council for the purchase of additional units in the future.
Are you guys getting that? Yes, Councillor Columbus, go ahead.
Chairman, the mayor's part of this PSB committee, and I totally agree with what she's presenting. At least we're going to have a good start. Okay, so I hope council supports that recommendation.
You ready?
Through you, just to get the financials right, so that's $17,000 this year, and then the 6 pole-mounted speed watch signs are an additional $7,750 each on top of that, right? Just to make sure.
Okay.
I'm not the math guy. I just want to make sure. 63,500 expenditure this year is what is council's voting on. So, and we don't have, the council hasn't determined where those revenues are going to come from.
Okay. We have Councillor Columbus as the, and Ian Rabbit. All those in favor? Sorry, do you have some more? Sorry. More questions?
We
Go
still
ahead.
need to
Sorry.
determine where the funding's going to be coming from. James, do you have any suggestions on that?
I thought he did, sorry. Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. For a dollar amount like this, I would suggest that the levy would pay for this budget amendment. Typically, we would bring this in a budget amendment report, and there's no reserve or anything really to fund something like this. So my suggestion would be from the levy. Somebody mentioned the council initiatives fund. I don't recommend using that for this kind of item.
Okay, further from anyone?
So,
Go ahead.
wanted it divided, so the first one would be that the police services, that Norfolk County incorporates the purchase of one mobile trailer speed sign at an approximate cost of $17,000 and 6 pole-mounted speed watch signs in the calendar year of 2019 for a total cost of $63,500 as a budget amendment. And that's the first question
First question.
to vote on.
All those in favor? That is carried.
All right.
The second half.
And the second one is that 6 full-mounted solar power speed watch signs per year over 5 years at an approximate cost of $7,750 per unit through the 2020 to 2023 capital budget to be presented to council for approval.
Any questions? If not, all those in favor? That is carried. So we're done there? Okay. We are moving to page 19, staff report CAO 19-21, reward boundary review. So I think that's you. Is that correct? Okay, sorry? Oh, Andy, sorry.
The second part will be presented to council for every budget, for each budget time.
I thought this was tied into having the plan submitted to council, at which point we would make future determinations on signs when the safety plan, safety study. What page?
Where are we?
There certainly is nothing preventing that. It would come up during each budget deliberations. I don't know if the safety plan is anticipated to be in place for 2020, though, which would be the issue. Is that I believe Mr. Trevally, when he was here, said that the implementation date is January 2021, so it might not be next year's budget that we get that.
Maybe I just will bounce this back to Mayor Chop for clarification. I understood the second part of her motion was that we would address the additional safety signs when the safety plan came to council. And if I misunderstood, I apologize.
It's likely, I'm sure it's my error. If we can get exactly what you want in that motion, then we'll correct it right now.
That's correct. So the first part was to approve the purchase for the mobile trailer and the signs for this year, and then to reevaluate the need for additional signs once we have received that community safety plan.
Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, and that the need for additional signs be reevaluated for submissions to capital budgets upon submission of the community safety plan. And then as long as everybody, all committee members are okay, because I read out wrong wording before, And that doesn't change your votes? Okay, then we can proceed.
Sorry, Pip. What was that?
Well,
Okay,
Mr. Griswold, how be we vote on it again then?
okay, all right, we can do it again, just hang on, I gotta go back then. Or forward, I should say. What are you gonna do? Page 45. We had a mover and a seconder, which was Columbus and Ian Rabbit, and everything was that we've changed at the last part of the last time we had a vote, so let's do it again. All those in favor? Okay, now we're set. Now, we will go back to staff report CAO 1921 Ward Boundary Review, page 19. Okay, who's got that? Anybody? Just for questions? Any questions about the ward boundary? Yeah, I think, who was it that pulled it? I'll have to look at it. Yes, I've got it now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just very brief comments through to staff. I found this information very helpful, and I wanted to note publicly that Ward 6 has been very vocal, especially in the last election, about boundary adjustments, and I will make a solid effort to communicate this and any additional correspondence with them at a future, should it come in any future agendas, because they felt as though they weren't made aware last time of boundary adjustments. So I thank you for sharing this with us this early in the year, in the term. Thank you.
Okay, well, the recommendation is that report CAO 19-021 be received as information. Any I guess I do know a mover and a seconder. Martin, Councillor Columbus, all those in favor? That is carried. So now, the next one I got to find out where it is. Where are we? Code, communications, we've got staff report PW 19-39, reparking plans for public safety, Friday the 13th, attachment 1 and 2 attached separately. So that is on page 75. Okay, and who's got that one? Sorry?
I do,
Barry?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for it. Yes, although it is a Public Works report, it was a joint effort between Community Services and Public Works, and I will be presenting the report tonight. I'll take council back to May 7th when staff did table a report on Friday the 13th that dealt with both licensing and liabilities and operational constraints of the Friday the 13th event. And council had required that staff come back with a separate licensing report, which I believe you received last week. And tonight is the, we call it the parking plans for public safety. So this report covers operational constraints, risks, and liability. This report was worked on a team of experts in event planning and consists of staff from Public Works, our fire department, the OPP, and our paramedics. We also consulted with two of the largest stakeholders, being the Board of Trade in Port Dover and the Port Dover Kinsman. And we had meetings with each of them to get their input for this report. Also at these meetings, the ward councillor was there, as well as Mayor Chop for one of the meetings. The report that's put forward tonight is, when I look around the table, the team here that helped present this, I mean, there's decades of event planning, traffic control, risk analysis. They really are the experts here at Norfolk County, and they put the report together the best they could, taking in to trying to limit liabilities, limit insurance issues, make the event safer and more enjoyable for all people at the event. The report itself is fairly wordy on road closures and things. So some of the highlights I think I'll point out to Norfolk County councillors before I turn it over for questions are, in no particular order, you will notice if you look at your maps, the two attachments. One is the attachment presently and one is the proposed. St. George and St. Andrew Street no longer will be one-way traffic, they will be two-way traffic. And this came out of liabilities, trying to reduce liabilities. Past show liabilities. Another part that I think we need to stress is the vendors will be moved from Main Street, or moved to Main Street. It will be from basically Nelson Street south to Clinton. Thank you. And the benefits of this is all the vendors, some of the stuff that came to us from the stakeholders were that some spots were better than others. And again, these are not food vendors. I'll talk about them in a moment. This way, every vendor gets Main Street of Port Dover, curbside with their tents, and everybody will get equal showing time, and people can walk through and see them. By moving the vendors to this section of Main Street, this made us take the bike parking to north of Nelson to the north end of town, and that had a lot of benefits too, because now the bikes, still walk with the bikes. However, when you go north of Nelson, the street is slightly wider. You have the sidewalks as well as people's front yards. So in the event of emergency, there's more room to move. With going back to the vendors being downtown on the Main Street section, there's a new barricade system, which I think is an attachment in the report as well. You'll see the standard wooden barricade, the concrete jersey barriers, as well as the barricades which will lower and raise with a touch of a button. And these were incorporated into the plan because it's just the world we live in. I know we had a terrible incident in Dover last summer with a car on the beach I don't need to remind you of, but these solid barricades will prevent that from happening. It also, in the event of emergency, a push of the button, the new barricades will lower, allowing in fire trucks and allowing people out. The other couple of notes I should tell you are food vendors will not be in the Main Street, but they will be in Powell Park. By putting all the foodies together, I'll call them, there's a safety factor that basically they have to have their fire plans, fire extinguishers, and by taking out T-shirts and sales beside these, where there's less chance of fire. And the rest of the report basically is just moving parking, motorcycle parking around. Staff have did some calculations. We feel that there is probably more parking for motorcycles, if not, there is no less. And the other part I should mention is we know we've got a really good product here, and we feel it's going to work. However, we will do an extensive debrief after the September event, and follow up with a report to council, inform them what worked, what didn't work, and maybe future steps that we need to take as we go through this event, making it safer. And you will notice in the conclusion, not the recommendation, there is talk of trying to, staff really think we need to look at how do we treat an off-season event, which would be November till April. And this, we really thought hard on this, putting it in as recommendation, but in talking with the groups, I think it's a little too much of this now. We have to really think it through. But a lot of liabilities can be limited if we know an off-weather event, we don't have beer tents, vendors on county property, that sort of thing. We think we can better control the event that way as well. So I just mentioned that because it's in the conclusion, but didn't make it to a recommendation. And with that, I'll turn it over to Norfolk County Council for any questions. And again, I have the team around me that worked a lot harder on this report than I did. They are our experts. So questions I don't know or you think are better answered by the fire chief or paramedic chief or OPP, please feel free to address your questions to them.
Any questions from the committee? Go ahead, Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Bill. I think this was a great example of staff working with the community to get their buy-in from the beginning, as opposed to us sort of imposing it on them after the fact. Couple questions. You just mentioned about not implementing any changes to the off-season just yet, and that being a point for further discussion. I just wondered if we might be able to put some clarity into the motion, just that the way that I read it was that you were actually incorporating that because it says that, and that Norfolk County Council directs staff to proceed with implementing the alterations to the Friday the 13th event organization and layout as described in the report. So there maybe be, it's not the entire report that we're adopting, it's the parking changes.
Through the chair, that is true. In discussions with the groups and others, we felt that was just a little too much, as you said, for this year.
Okay,
But-
so maybe just before we get to the vote, Mr. Chair, I'll just make a
Go
little
ahead.
change to the wording thereafter. The other question I had in terms of the barricades, do we own these barricades currently?
Through the chair, we own some. We own, obviously, the wooden ones Public Works do own a lot of. We have a number of jersey barriers. The jersey barriers, they will be purchasing a few more, but they are a construction item, which they can use on all for other sorts of activities as well as construction. The ones that we will have to rent are the controlled vehicle access barriers, the ones that go up and down. So we've talked to some suppliers of these, and we will not be purchasing these units this time around. If successful, I think they play a big part in not only this event, but other events in Norfolk County. But as now we're going to try to rent them for September, see how they work before we purchase.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I'm just wondering, that obviously has a financial implication, and I'm just wondering why that's not where that's going to be funded from, and like, where's the funding coming from that section?
Through the chair to the mayor. With Public Works, and I don't step on Jason's toes here, but it's a large operational group. So, take for instance, if we have 3 Friday the 13th in a year, their base budget will be able to absorb this without having to go into an over budget on these items.
Okay, so it's not from the festival budget or anything like that? This will be within Public Works?
Through the chair, that's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you want to make some changes or something? Or? Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I agree with Mayor Chop's comments, but I'm going to repeat what I said last week because you two weren't here, and I know how hard you guys both worked on this report. And I had feedback from one of the stakeholders who sent a text message after our group meeting thanking county staff for one of the best meetings they've ever had with Norfolk County. So thank you for all of your work on this report. It's appreciated. But now we go on to my questions. Okay. Firstly, I know we discussed in the meeting the bike parking and where it starts, and Nelson Street is a big. I guess my intent is that I want to keep the bikes as close as possible for foot traffic, pedestrian traffic, and I am all in full support of supporting staff and making safety enhancements and changes to the event, but I want to be careful that we keep buy-in from our stakeholders and community members, and we make subtle changes and don't do everything overnight. So when we left that meeting, it was my understanding that we were going to do some measurements and find out how much space we would have for vendors and then maybe revisit this. So can we chat about Nelson Street, please?
Go ahead.
Through the chair to Councillor Martin. I think a lot of that may hinge on the amount of vendors that we get for the event, because obviously we don't want to put vendors on Main Street and have them not have enough room for vendors. With the new licensing fees being the only warm weather event in 2019, staff are recommending that the bikes still stay north of Nelson and not come south of Nelson. And part of it is we're just not sure of the event. If we got if we got a little closer and there are enough vendors that can fit in that part of Maine, it's a possibility. But at this point, staff are, their safeguard is to have motorcycles north of Nelson and not crowd the south end. Okay, I will just, for the time being, leave you with my preference would be to have the bikes as close as possible to Chapman Street so that they are nearby foot traffic, but we can revisit that. I do have a few more questions. I was going to ask about the barricades. I had a comment. I spoke with some business owners, and specifically the road closures coming into effect at noon on Thursday the 12th. I believe that
or correct me if I'm wrong, is this slightly earlier than previous years? Specifically, I had a conversation with a business owner on Main Street, right by Walker Street, and they have, they rent out their parking lot, and a tractor trailer will come in and back up and offload vendors into their parking lot. What will happen if their road is closed at noon?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin. You're correct, it is slightly earlier. The thing that staff aren't sure about is how long it's going to take to set up the Jersey barriers as well as the access barrier. So Public Works staff will start their work as early as they can. We fully understand that there will be people that will need to get through. There will be cars in that area. And with the beauty with these barriers are we will try to get most folks out. If somebody has to come in, this barrier can be lowered. But keep in mind the vendors are going to come in at some point too, so it'll be a timing act. But the closure at noon, we would like to be hard and fast. However, I don't think we're going to get that until we know how long this takes to set up. So there will be some, as in other years too, when we block the main street off, there are always cars in there, delivery trucks that have to get through, and with the wooden barricades, they would basically on their own move them and drive in. So I think, I don't want to say there will be no hiccups, but staff will be there and work with these folks, and we will advertise the new times and that sort of thing far in advance. We'll get as much information out. We get on all websites. I know Kinsmen are very involved with the Facebook and things, putting that out. Hopefully everybody knows and it isn't an issue, but even with the closure, a push of the button, we can open that up and let somebody in and out. It's not ideal, but there will be a time they're shut down, but we're flexible.
No, that's great, thank you. And then my next question is on page 68, which is 2 of 6 on the agenda. The following parking restrictions shall come into effect between 3 a.m. Friday the 13th and 11:59 p.m. Friday the 13th, and then it's A through T. Are any of those, forgive me because I've never paid attention close enough, are any of these out the normal road and parking restriction road? Are there new considerably?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, they are the same.
Thank you. Okay, those are my only questions. Again, thank you for this. I'll wait to see if Mayor Chop has some type of amendment here. Are there any other comments from my colleagues? But I would like to revisit the bike parking.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. So with the controlled vehicle access barriers, will there be a truck still attached to it when it's set up, or truck drops it, leaves, goes park somewhere else, and then is there going to be someone near it throughout the day?
Through the chair to Councillor Taylor. There will be no truck near it. They will be set up. The Jersey barriers will be on both sides. Correct me, is it a 16-foot opening? Yeah, almost a 16-foot opening, so, and it's a push of a button. And what we're still trying to flesh out is we can have a control access button very close to that and within our emergency control vehicles. So we should be able, in the event of an emergency, as long as communication is good, we don't see any problem with those. A push of the button, they're down. So it's not as if somebody has to come from the command center or anything to lift them or close them. We'll have staff very, very close.
Perfect. And it's not like there needs to be a key in it or anything to activate it with the button. You can just press the button and it goes down?
Through the chair, that is my understanding, yes.
Great, thank you.
Well,
Anyone else? Councilor Columbus.
A quick question about resident passes. Can you make a comment about that, Bill?
through the chair to Councillor Geisens, they're still alive and well. Last year, we made up another 5,000 or 6,000 for the next 5 years' events. So again, they will be up to the police officers to, to ask at the checkpoints coming in, but passes are still alive and well and being used.
Okay. Go ahead. Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just coming back to Councillor Martin's point, I think the buy-in from the Board of Trade and from the Kinsmen was pretty strong, but also with that belief in mind that we were going to try to get the bikes as close as possible. So are you saying that that's not possible, or would we be able to, once we see final numbers of vendors and what that looks like, be able to evaluate that situation, whether or not we could get them closer to Chapman.
Through the chair to Mayor Chop. There is a few other things that I did fail to mention. If you look at Nelson Street, which we've talked about with the parking, that is an access route for the fire department. That is something new that I failed to mention as well. So with that, with turning radius and fire trucks going through and general congestion, I think my answer will be staff would still recommend that motorcycle parking be north of Nelson and not south.
I guess my concern is ensuring the success of this event, that we get full buy-in from everybody. And like Councillor Martin, if we make the changes too drastic, and let's say it happens to, the weather doesn't cooperate in September, which is very possible, and we have bikes that are all, there's a big gap between the number of vendors and where the bikes start, people are going to become frustrated with that. And as opposed to celebrating the new layout of the vendors together and the food trucks together and so on, instead of celebrating the success, I feel that there's going to be a bunch of pushback. Now, granted, if it's a beautiful sunny day and, you know, we do see large numbers, then that's all quite feasible. But you know, the probabilities, it's kind of probably 50-50 as to whether or not we're going to see good weather in September. So that's just kind of why I'm concerned about parking them too far away, because I don't want to see this not be a success and have pushback in the future.
Through the chair to Mayor Chop. Staff are talking here, and we do understand your point. Again, I'm just trying to think, we have to prepare a bylaw if this is accepted tonight with all of these changes. And I'm looking at it, maybe I'll ask Mr. Gazelle here. Main Street is closed anyways. I'm just wondering, it does hinge on the amount of vendors. I'm not sure, maybe we can work with clerks before we prepare the bylaw totally and see if we could leave that option depending on the amount of vendors. But I'm not sure if Andy can talk to that now. Maybe we need to chat as staff at SLT tomorrow before.
I think through you, Chair Geisens, just very, very quickly, just thinking about it for the first time now, I think that what we could do would be plan to have a bylaw that is kind of straightforward, but then also address, hopefully before the summer recess, because I know the OPP want a bylaw in place as soon as possible for planning purposes. But we could add a specific area where a staff member would have a delegated authority from council to do to make a determination on something like that would give a staff member the ability to do it. It's just to look into that. But I think that would be a capacity. If it's just one road or two roads that we want staff to be able to have a specific delegation with on this, then we could definitely do something like that for council. And that would give the flexibility that we otherwise don't have, because bylaws are rather rigid, so we need somebody to be able to make a last-minute determination, is what I hear council saying.
Yes?
Just one more question through you, Mr. Chair. There was also some discussions with the Kinsmen. I thought there was agreement at the meeting as well that you were going to look into the situation with them needing to move merchandise through the event. Is that going to be incorporated in this bylaw or something separate?
Through the chair, that I know what you're speaking of. That is not being addressed in this report or bylaw.
But it's to come then still?
I believe our decision on that was the fact we figured that the Kinsmen, and perhaps we should communicate back with them, would have different opportunities instead of having a bylaw on the roads that they wanted. Perhaps could they use a different vehicle? Could they go to a different bank? Because what we were worried about is once that bylaw passes, it opens it up for all people to use.
Well, I thought we looked at a number of options, and one was considering just that one section of the street. That was it. I mean, at the same time, there's a number of illegal ATVs that are all over down the road down there, and you have an organization that's looking to find a safe way to move money and merchandise through major crowds of people down one single stretch of road. and they're asking to be able to do it legally versus all the people that actually do it illegally. So I just don't understand why we can't find a way. There are other events in Ontario. We even spoke about some of them that day that do find ways to have a workaround solution. I don't think they're asking for the world with this, given that we've often talked about part of the reason we didn't want to, start charging for the event and so on was because of the safety of taking money from people entering Port Dover and how we would navigate that issue, and not to mention the fact that we don't want to be running the event, but.
Through the chair to Mayor Chop, I guess it's safe to say that staff did discuss it. We weren't in favor of having a bylaw for that. So if it is council's direction, we can get communications going with the Kinsmen, because I think we did talk about a couple options and they weren't clear on whether they wanted this or whether they wanted another option. So it's probably something we didn't flush out, but staff were not in favor of a bylaw, allowing the off-road vehicles on that certain road they were going to take.
I'm fine with not allowing, through you, Mr. Chair, not having it incorporated in the bylaw, but just that we try to find some sort of solution for them.
Further, go ahead.
I'll make a motion then. That's report PW 19-39 parking plans for public safety Friday the 13th be received as information, and that Norfolk County Council direct staff to proceed with implementing the alterations to the Friday the 13th event organization and layout as described in report PW 19-39, and further that no changes to off-season events be made at this time, and further that staff once total vendor numbers are in, that staff determine whether the bikes could be moved closer to Chapman, and further that Norfolk County Council repeal bylaw 2018-75, and further that staff be directed to prepare and present a bylaw for approval to enact the temporary road closures and parking restrictions for Friday the 13th festivities as outlined in staff report PW 19-39. And Mr. Clerk, if I could just add sort of this section about the bikes being moved closer to Chapman in the interest of ensuring the success of the event.
Are you moving that? Okay, thank you. Seconder? Martin, can you read what we've got, or are you still trying to get it all down?
It's good if I turn it on. That report, PW 1939, parking plans for public safety Friday the 13th be received as information, that Norfolk County Council directs staff to proceed with implementing the alterations to the Friday the 13th event organization and layout as described in report PW 1939, and further that once total vendor numbers are in, staff make determinations on whether bike parking can be moved closer to Chapman Street in the interest of ensuring the success of the event, and further that no changes to off-season events be made at this time, and further that Norfolk County Council repeal bylaw 2018-75, and further that staff be directed to prepare and present a bylaw for approval to enact the temporary road closures and parking restrictions for Friday the 13th festivities as outlined in staff report PW 1939.
Any questions? If not, all in favor? That is carried. Moving on to staff report PW 19-22.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
If I
sorry.
could just add one final thing here, a further staff direction on behalf of council. I think that the Kinsmen do a lot for Norfolk County, and I don't think that this is an extraordinary ask. And so I'd just like to make it clear, if we could have a motion that staff be directed to work with the Kinsmen to determine a suitable solution for moving their merchandise and through Friday the 13th.
Go ahead, Councillor Taylor. Oh, sorry, your seconder, okay. Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe I should ask the clerk, the province has committed to redoing the Off-Road Vehicle Act anyway. Are they doing that by changing the regulations, which they continue to do while the House is not sitting, or is that take an amendment to the actual law itself? Because it could be by fall that everybody in Ontario is going to be allowed to drive off-road vehicles on the roads anyways.
My apologies that I don't have an immediate answer for you on that one. I can look into it, though, and give you an answer before council ratification next week, so that you council will have kind of that details on what the status is then.
So we got the latest one that we needed?
Oh,
No?
he knows.
Okay, all right, over there. Do we need a motion to do that? Yeah, we do. Okay. All those in favor? That is carried. Anything else? If not, we are again at staff report PW 19-22/FS 1915 strategic asset management policy. I don't know who's got that one.
Before we get to that one, should we go? This presentation might take us past 9 p.m.
Okay. Guess we can do it. I'm looking for somebody that the committee might proceed the 9 p.m. to the address to address business on hand. So can I get a mover and a seconder for now? Yes, Michele. And who was the other one? Who was the second one? Taylor, okay. Sorry. Okay. All in favor? Well, we're going anyway, so.
We got to do it. Yeah.
We got to do it. Okay. So who's got this next one? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to introduce Jordan Sangers. He's our Manager of Asset Management, and he is going to do a presentation on an asset management policy for council to consider and hopefully pass tonight. It's part of legislation from Ontario Reg 588/17 that all municipalities in Ontario are required to have an asset management plan.
Hello. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello, Council. As James said, I'm Jordan Sangers, looking after asset management here. The report before you is in regards to the adoption of a strategic asset management policy, but we thought it would be a good opportunity to give a brief overview of asset management and the regulatory environment surrounding it. Perfect. Okay, so let's start by exploring what an asset is. In the asset management context, assets provide our community with services. These community assets are publicly owned. These assets are made up of natural ecosystems, like aquifers and wetlands, the constructed environment, like roads, buildings, and playgrounds, and the equipment and resources needed to maintain what we have. So we have our water, sewer, and drainage systems, our transportation networks, our parks, our open spaces, our recreation facilities. They all provide services that our communities relies on. Each of these assets performs a function which provides a service that our residents have come to value and expect as part of their everyday lives. So management in our context means to actively care for the things that we own and are responsible for. Management is an active and ongoing activity that ensures that services are delivered in a seamless fashion. Our community assets, which provide these services to our residents, are valued in the billions of dollars. So actively managing these assets means paying attention to both what we can and can't see. It is caring for the visible roads and bridges, as well as the hidden pipes. We need to actively manage all assets in a way that ensures that they will continue to contribute to the quality of life of our residents, both now and in the future. So what is asset management? Simply put, asset management is the coordinated effort to realize value from our assets while balancing costs, risks, and service levels. It is a process used in decision-making. So for local governments, engaging in an asset management process makes sure that we can answer the fundamental question, how do we best care for the assets that deliver services to our residents? And what our residents truly want are safe and sustainable assets delivered in a predictable, cost-effective manner. In truth, they don't want to have to think about it. They just want it to happen without any unpleasant surprises or inconvenient disruptions. So our job is to manage assets and deliver services in the smoothest and most fiscally responsible manner possible. It's about moving from a reactive environment to a proactive environment. So it makes sure that we have the information to answer these questions and to be able to make informed strategic decisions. So what do we own? Where is it? What is it worth? What condition is it in? What needs to be done? And when does it need to be done by? Asset management is an ongoing process that leads to safe and sustainable services delivered in a predictable, cost-effective manner. It takes time and effort. An asset management program does not appear overnight and will take years to fully implement. So although municipalities have been completing asset management activities for quite some time, it was in 2012 when the Building Together Guide was released. This was a blueprint for municipalities to create asset management plans and tied the access to capital funding from the province to having those plans. At the time, many municipalities scrambled to produce their initial plans to ensure the continuation of funding. And there was little consistency between them in regards to completeness, level of detail, methodology, and assumptions. So Stantec created several plans for the county in 2014 for roads, bridges, water, and wastewater, with fleet and facilities being completed in 2016. These plans were a starting point and differed in usefulness based on the asset class, as they tended to work with the data that the county could provide. So if the county had a good inventory, as was the case with roads, the plans were fairly detailed. Many of these plans, however, were very high level and didn't provide a lot of tactile support. So in an effort to further improve and standardize asset management planning, in December of 2017, the province introduced Ontario Regulation 588-17, the Municipal Asset Management Planning Regulation, a regulation falling under the Infrastructure for Jobs and Prosperity Act. So as was the case in 2012, the province has tied existing and future funding opportunities to this regulation, including formula-based grants such as the gas tax and OCIF funding, which amount to around $6.8 million a year for Norfolk County, as well as any current and future application-based grants, which for council's reference, the county received roughly $3.2 million last year. So this regulation governs all aspects of municipal asset management and contains 4 major milestones which every municipality must adhere to. The first is a strategic asset management policy, which must be adopted by July 1st of this year. This is what we're here for tonight. Next, asset management plans must be prepared and endorsed by council by July 1st of 2021 for all core assets, which would include roads, bridges, water, wastewater, and stormwater, both linear and plant assets. These plans must contain an inventory of the assets, the current service levels, and the cost to maintain those service levels, both capital and major operating. So by July 1st of 2023, these plans must be built out to include all county-owned assets. This would include the various buildings and facilities that we operate, our fleet, our playground equipment, etc. And the final milestone is taking those plans and tying in proposed service levels, lifecycle management strategies, and financial strategies. And this must be completed by July 1st of 2024. So again, this is a very long journey we're on. Okay, so that was a brief overview of asset management and the provincial regulations accompanying it. Now I'd like to talk about the policy before you. So the overall purpose of this policy is for council to provide leadership in and commitment to the development and implementation of the county's asset management system. To do this, the policy outlines the fundamental asset management principles which will be implemented in the county. It lays out some key roles and responsibilities within the county, outlines the assets and services which are in scope, and finally allows us to stay compliant with the regulation to ensure the continuation of funding. So broadly, the policy contains 3 overarching categories which are required by the regulation. There are statements, which are declarations that the county makes, such as our guiding principles and our strategic alignments. There are processes, which are an overview of the methods the county will adhere to, such as a high-level governance model and how the asset management plans will be incorporated into our budgeting processes. And finally, there are commitments, which the county makes to adhere to the regulation, such as incorporating climate change and stakeholder engagement in our system. So I won't get into too much detail on the policy as a whole, as council has a copy of it in the report, but thought I would highlight some of the responsibilities of council, which are required by the regulation and included in our policy. So the first is to endorse and publicly post the strategic asset management policy. This shows council's commitment to asset management within the county. The next is to approve the asset management plans and their updates at least every 5 years. I do foresee this becoming more frequent as the plans become more integrated with our budgeting processes. The next is to conduct annual reviews of the asset management system. This would be facilitated through myself and ensures that the county is continually moving forward. And finally, council commits to support ongoing efforts to continually improve and implement the asset management plans. This ties in strongly with the annual reviews mentioned above. Okay, so before I leave council with the policy to discuss, I want to go over some next steps for the asset management system. So once the policy is endorsed, we'll be creating an asset management steering committee, which will be comprised of a multi-departmental team led by myself. The committee will ensure that the principles outlined in the policy are followed as we develop our asset management system. The next thing would be an asset management strategy, which is currently being worked on. This is a working level document outlining a variety of aspects of the county's asset management system, such as software details, internal processes for managing data, a more detailed governance model, and next steps for the asset management system. So whereas the policy outlines a commitment from council and the why do we do asset management, the strategy is the how do we do asset management. There will be more to come on this front later in the year. So I've also been working with various departments to compile asset inventories, standardize and verify these inventories, and then load them into a unified system. This is a critical activity, as when it comes time to create our asset management plans, this is the data we'll be relying on. And when it comes to data, garbage in is garbage out. So if we don't have good data, we won't have very useful plans. And then finally, the asset management plans themselves will be created and answer the questions, what needs to be done, when does it need to be done by, and how much is it going to cost? And I also like to add in what the impact of doing nothing would be. So, thank you very much for your time. If you have any questions regarding the presentation or the policy before you,
Any
I'd be
questions?
happy to answer them.
Mayor Chop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for your presentation. Great presentation, by the way. Great slideshow, too. Couple questions. I'm a little bit confused. Did the county not spend a bunch of money on an asset management plan during the previous term of council?
I was going to say through the chair, yes. So I believe in 2014, we paid Stantec to create several plans for us. So that was for the roads, the bridges, the water, and the wastewater.
Okay.
And then they created 2 more plans in 2016 for fleet and facility. As I mentioned, we did that. That was in regards to the 2012 regulation to ensure the continuation of provincial fundings. What happened is a lot of municipalities kind of scrambled and paid consultants to create plans so that they could check a box saying, yes, we have an asset management plan. Now the province has come out with this new regulation pretty much saying, no, that's not going to cut it. You need to actually start doing
Okay.
asset management.
Okay, that's helpful. Sorry, Mr. Chair, just another question. That's really helpful, actually, to clarify that. I was looking at a couple of asset management plans, just in some other municipalities to kind of get a feel what they had, and one I pulled up was Guelph's, and I guess there were some other asset management plans where I saw some sort of involvement, whether that's on the steering committee or so on, from community members as well. But I also think that it's important that they see kind of what's going on. I mean, just they share a different perspective of things. I'm just wondering, I guess, who sort of you envision being on the steering committee, and whether there might be sort of an appetite to include some community members or something. Any thoughts?
Through the chair, no, that's a good question. So as part of the policy, we do have stakeholder engagement in there. The policy is fairly high level, so we've more or less just committed to having stakeholder engagement. We haven't gotten into the specifics. I know when it comes time for the Asset Management Steering Committee, my thoughts were at the beginning we were going to keep it internal. We kind of need to get our data in order first, but that would be probably an excellent idea, is to start involving some community members and even members of council in that committee.
And just further to that point, again, when I was reading some from other municipalities, some of the policies seemed, I don't know, there were some interesting ideas in terms of incorporating innovation, so there's no duplication of the use of assets and, data management and that kind of thing. And I know this is a first draft, and I know that we absolutely need to do this. I mean, it's part of the reason that we've lost out on a bunch of funding and stuff in the past. So I'm kind of hoping maybe as we go through this, we might maybe even be able to develop that policy a little bit more.
Through the chair, I can comment on that as well. I kind of kept the policy fairly high level because we are working on this asset management strategy, which I'm hoping we can kind of dive down into the nitty gritty. So it could be something that if it doesn't fit into the policy, it could also fit into the strategy, which is, like I said, more of a working level document, so we have some more leeway of of making changes and modify it as we go along and kind of progress on this journey.
Awesome, perfect. And one final question,
Go
sorry
ahead.
if I may. I'm just, this is the only report, are you the sole author on this? There was just nothing of who authored this report.
Through the chair, I created the report.
Okay.
Okay.
No, that's all good. It's just, everyone always has who it's submitted by and so on. It was just the only one. I just didn't know who was all involved in the process. Awesome, thank you.
Councilor Columbus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Very good report, Jordan. My question was, I know you weren't there in 2014, but had we had followed an asset management plan since then, would we have an issue with water situation in Port Dover at this time? Or how did that, if we had some of that in the plan like you mentioned, how did that slip by everybody?
Through the chair. So the plans in 2014, because the county didn't have great data, the plans were very high level, kind of this is roughly what you should be spending every year. It didn't get into the nitty gritty. With the new regulation, we have to get into service levels, which for the water, we'd be looking at capacity, and with wastewater, we'd be looking at capacity. So in these new plans that we're creating, those will be addressed.
Yes, go ahead.
The asset management plan, though, just so we're clear, is not the driver behind the situation. I don't think that we found ourselves in with Port Dover. I think that that's far more reaching than simply having an asset management plan in place. I definitely think it would be a benefit, though.
Okay, nothing further? I'm looking for a recommendation that staff report PW 19-22 FS 1915 Strategic Assessment Management Policy be received as information, and that council approve the Strategic Assessment Management Policy attached as Attachment 1. Yes, go ahead.
I'll
Seconder?
move the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Seconder? Okay, I have a motion moved by Ian Rabbit and Councillor Taylor. Anything further to come? All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the next one, which is Staff Report PW 19-38, re-award of contract by Lynn Park Water Main for Lynn Park Water Main Phase 2, Port Dover. Who's got that one? Okay, right over there.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council. What you have in front of you is a budget amendment report for replacement of some water main assets in Port Dover. The brief history on this is in 2018, we did some phase 1 of this project. It is in kind of the northwest corner of Port Dover. Actually, if you look at page 95 of your agendas, you can see a nice little site maps that shows you where we're talking. We're looking at the replacement of old 4-inch cast iron water main throughout the area of the Lynn Park subdivision, being East Street, Jackson Heights, O'Rourke Ave, and part of Willowdale Crescent. Essentially, what had happened is we gone out for tender for phase 2 of this, and are coming back with a budget amendment looking for $502,000 in order to complete the phase 2 of this project. Of note, I will point out that phase 1 actually did come in under budget. Phase 2, we came in proposed over budget. However, that is partially because there has been some additional work added to the scope of this project prior to or after the first budget was approved. That being that if you look at the map on page 95, you will see that East Street is actually East Street North and East Street South, and it's two little dead-end pieces. What staff are proposing is actually completing the connection of that road on East Street, so we will be extending the sanitary main and doing some stormwater drainage in there. There are some existing lots within that section of the subdivision which are currently been inaccessible due to the fact that there is no road frontage. And staff were recommending that at this time we could, since we're doing the work in that area and replacing the water main through there, that we would continue that road through. As another side note, this is a water, other than that section of East Street, this is a water main only project. And due to that, we are not just doing a trench installation of this water main. We will actually be putting a new full 2 inches of asphalt across the entire road once we are complete. So essentially, you're going to get a nice facelift on the road, new water pipes to get rid of those old 4-inch cast mains that cause issues with breakage and dirty water complaints, and the completion of the road on East Street. So I will gladly take any questions you may have.
Okay. Council, or Mayor Chop?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just wondering, Jason, could you just, given that this is so far over budget, the property owners that have requested servicing, they just came to Norfolk County and requested servicing, and that was just okay?
Through the chair to Mayor Chop. From my understanding of this, it was not necessarily that the property owners, specifically of these lots, have approached us to have this work done. It was more of a staff recommendation. We have piecemealed together that bit of East Street for a number of years now. I can think back myself at least to back into 2006, where you get one lot that wants to be developed and we go through a whole big process with them to extend sanitary and extend water and deal with grading and drainage. And then 2 years later, somebody else wants to build along one of those lots and we go through that whole same process again. So part of the theory was that if we just built the infrastructure now, there was a suggestion that we could look at putting a holding reserve across the frontage of those properties where we could then apportion some of that additional cost back to those lots for when they did want to actually build or develop on there. So it wouldn't be totally borne by the county, but at least the work would be done and the infrastructure would be in place. The other big key to that is it does eliminate 2 dead ends of that road, which are kind of sore points when it comes to garbage collection, when it comes to snow plows and emergency vehicle access through the site.
Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'm kind of torn. On the one hand, I agree with you. On the other hand, I know there's a road in Simcoe, and I can't remember the name of the program. Is it the land improvement, where people, when there is a major project, they have the opportunity to, if they want to add sewers or so on. And I know there was a big section in Simcoe where the property owners in the same kind of situation, they actually had to go and pay out of their own pocket. And now, this is the first of many reports to come of unbudgeted amounts that it seems multiple in this report alone. And certainly every week we seem to have this is unbudgeted and this is unbudgeted. And when this is such a big difference, and when there's talk of funding this from, in part, the Roadway Construction Reserve Fund, I guess that's starting to grate on me a little bit because there is no Roadway Construction Reserve Fund. We know that it's a $20 million deficit. So everything that we're doing right now is taking out more debt. And so I guess I just looking to ensure that there's equity and fairness across Norfolk County, that if there were residents in Simcoe in a similar situation that had to pay for this out of pocket, how it is that, where's the funding for that coming from?
Through the chair to Mayor Chop, I cannot specifically comment on exactly where the funding is coming from. Mr. Johnson may have some other comments on that. I mean, at the end of the day, we're looking at this as an opportunity for us to kind of get into this area and get some infrastructure laid and some work done that provides an overall benefit to the area and allows us to then kind of get out of that area for a number of years. The other buried infrastructure that we're not touching has been reviewed, and there's no foreseeable need to have to get back into that. At the end of the day, this, I do believe that this is something that we could look at not doing the road work, and just continuing straight through with the water main replacement. However, it was staff's recommendation just to try and get the whole project done and be done with it in that area.
Go ahead.
And, sorry, Jason, I've been up since, I don't even know what time in the morning. Is this including, like, were some of these on septic systems then?
Through the chair to Mayor Chop. No, there are currently no homes in there that are on septic or anything like that. A lot of the lots that that are in there are vacant. It's either roads have been built and services have been extended over the years a number of times, or it's still a vacant lot. So I believe there's at least 4 or 5 vacant lots in this area that essentially we would be looking at completing the road work in front of them, which then opens them up to potential future development.
I guess for me, that might have been an interesting piece to see then, how much money, you know, the next time we look at a report like this, if we're looking at there's the potential for 20 new homes and what those hookups to our water mains, what revenue that would generate as the offsetting component, so that then there becomes a financial justification piece here as opposed to just, you know, we're way over budget and let's go ahead with it.
Through the chair to Mayor Chop, that is noted. We will definitely keep that in mind.
Cool. Thanks.
Councillor Van Passen, and then Martin, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if you could expand a bit more on that possibility of the 1 foot reserve or the hold on it, or under the local community improvement part that, you know, we do the work now, but if any developer wants to actually do something on those lots, that they would have to reimburse us a certain amount of money. Like, I think that is a pretty simple solution to this. We want to fix the road while we're there, but we want the people who are going to get the benefit to pay for it, even if we have to collect money down the road. Is that possible?
Through the chair to Councillor Van Passen. It is something that Norfolk County has done in the past in certain other instances. I'll be perfectly frank with you that I've not been thoroughly involved with the nitty-gritty details of doing that. But it's definitely something we could get some more information on for council and bring that back, because I do support the fact that notion is sound, in the sense that we are putting in this infrastructure, and certain properties may receive direct benefit from that, from the work that we are doing, and the rest of taxpayers are paying for. So.
Okay, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jason, to your comment about not needing to go back and do any additional work in that area anytime soon, I have an email from a concerned citizen with regards to unfinished work in that exact neighborhood, and please correct me if this information isn't accurate, but it stated that just last year water mains were replaced and asphalt was laid, but long story short, the work is not completed. There's still open spots of gravel in the road and sidewalks that haven't been completed and grading that hasn't been completed. So it seems like it almost would have been a good time to maybe do this in the same neighborhood last year when the other work went on, firstly. And secondly, how do we communicate and articulate to other neighbors in that same community that there's construction crews coming in to work on other streets, but that we haven't fixed problem A and we're over to problem B?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, I would really like to know exactly where we would be talking about in an instance like this, because if there is work that a contractor has been deficient on, then that is something that we would definitely want to follow up with them directly and make sure that that work is completed. That is one of the reasons we do have construction holdbacks on all of our projects, is to be able to hold contractors accountable to completing their work. As for construction being in the same area as what was last year, I guess, would comment that that is a result of the fact that originally when we looked at doing this work, the intent was to do the work that was done last year along with this work all in one shot. Just the scope of that and timing just got to be so much that that's why we did bring it forward as being a two-year phased project.
Thank you. And Lynn Park Ave and Willowdale Crescent.
Anyone else? Okay, I have a recommendation here that staff report PW 19-38, award of contract PWE 1966 Lynn Park Water Main Phase 2, Port Dover, be received as information, and that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk and county clerk to execute a contract with the firm of Elgin Construction Company Limited with the for contract PWE-19-66 in the amount of $1,310,422.06, and further that the approved 2019 capital budget be amended as outlined with report PW 19-38. Any questions? Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to mention, I believe that the mayor had a question prior to your reading that.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I'll let you go.
That's okay. I'm just wondering if Mr. Schlang might maybe be able to comment. I guess for me, I just can't understand how, when we're funding this $500,000 variance from a roadway construction reserve fund, which doesn't exist, we're funding it from debt, how we've gone $500,000 over budget to add some additional homes or lots, and it's not costing those residents anything, but it's or future developers in that area, but it's costing all of the taxpayers of Norfolk County money. I just wonder, I couldn't think of the name, and thank you, Councillor Van Passen, for the local community improvement program that I know we haven't used here in several years, but it is a tool that's available to municipalities, and I'm just wondering why we're not looking at something like that before we just jump in and we're just $500,000 over budget again, with more budget variances to come later on this evening.
Chair, there's two components to that question. I'll let James answer the first part with the budget, the reserve, and then we'll talk about the local improvement. James?
Through the chair to Madam Mayor. So yes, our roads reserve is in a deficit situation. However, that doesn't necessarily mean that we're using debt to fund anything that is from that reserve right now. We have in prior years took out debentures to try to fund some of the reserves. However, we did put in an aggressive plan to bring that road construction reserve into the black using several different methods. I won't get into them now, but as far as funding is concerned, the reserve is appropriate, and it will get into a positive balance at some point.
Just for clarification, I'm not suggesting that it's not appropriate to use that. I'm just trying to make the point that the money isn't there. Last week, I think we just issued debentures to fund cutting down trees in Norfolk County. So regardless of what terminology we use, my point is just simply that, you know, we are in a precarious financial position, and I hope that we can start looking to unique tools that are available to us, like the community improvement, local community improvement program that I don't think has been used in Norfolk County for a number of years, and it was in the past.
Through you, Chair, to the second part of the question, I think, you know, Jason's approach to this is sound, you know, dig once. And so if you could give Jason and I a chance to look at if it would be applicable to apply that, and at least have, we can come back maybe by next week before you approve the bylaw. Just let us look into it.
Well, for this one, it might be challenging, but I think generally you need to get the buy-in from the property owners before we actually go and put the tender out and say that we're going to do it for them with at no cost. So I don't know I don't know that this is necessarily going to be the one that's the turning point, but my
Right.
point is more that moving forward.
We could
that-
use this as a case study,
Yeah.
and we've done this differently.
Exactly.
Councillor Columbus and then Councillor
Yeah,
Van
just
Passen.
to add to that, I know previously in the township of Delhi, which is more than 19 years ago, I guess, now, we did, if it enhanced the property value to some way, I know on McIntosh Drive in Delhi, if it enhanced the value of the property, we did get participation of dollars from the owners of the properties abutting that for road upgrades and water and sewer. So maybe you want to look at that, Jason. Must be some information on it somewhere on McIntosh Drive.
Motion's on the floor.
Motion's on the floor. Councillor Van Passen, you're next.
Yeah, I'd be willing to move that motion to approve the tender, Mr. Chairman. I've watched this road, the piecemeal basis that it's been worked at, and we're there now, get it done, and I do expect a report back before the council meeting that there are some sort of options on how we can recoup a little bit of that extra cost. I know we're trying to do the right thing with borrowed money, and I wish I could explain this to my wife. I don't know why I'm telling anybody over here, but I will move the motion, sir.
You'll move the motion, okay? Seconder? Councillor Martin? I think I've read it. All those in favor? It is carried. Moving on to the next one. Staff report PW 19-40. Re-tender results, award of tender, renovations, East Area Roads. Who's got this one? You, boy, you got a lot of them today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council. Again, I am here humbly asking for a budget amendment. Essentially, the background on this is we've started some required facility upgrades to our East Area Roads Operations Yard. Essentially, this is the central hub of our East Area operations. We house, I believe, 13 staff out of there. We have a relatively new sand and salt storage facility. We have a new fuel system that services both our fire and EMS crews as well as all of our other county trucks. The reason it is a budget amendment is because if anyone has ever been to this site, it wouldn't take much to actually walk through and see that it's in a pretty old, decrepit state. Many of you would likely be appalled to have to actually work there. We currently have a rental trailer parked in one of the truck bays in order to have office space for staff to actually work. There's literally a half-functioning bathroom. It is not the nicest place in the world. We had a budget to try and get some general repairs done and improve the working conditions and everything of this site. And as with any old building, as soon as they started digging and tearing apart walls to investigate as to actually what needed to be done, it had kind of ballooned into where we are now here asking you for $171,000 to complete these required facility upgrades. I believe our original budget was $60,000. And that is the unfortunate reality of the situation. I see Councillor Huffman's putting up her hand. She was actually one of the few that came to the site, so I would love it if she could explain some of her experience of being there.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. Exactly, that's why I put my hand up. I'm shocked that actually that is all the ask is for, based on the condition that the building was in. It can't even begin to describe it, actually. There's some, It's in pretty bad shape. And needless to say, it's not like we have people who are coming in, we have guys who are coming in work boots and construction stuff. So I mean, a lot of what is there gets used pretty heavily. It's not like, we've got people coming in with their little lunch pails and sitting down, and it's a rough and tough kind of building. And it is in actually, like I said, poor shape. And it is a large facility, and it does have a lot of employees, and I would, again, shocked that it's only under 200,000 for the repairs. So I would definitely support this.
Further? Go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair, and just further to the comment that Councillor Hoffman made, that one of the reasons that we've actually managed to keep it as low as we did is because even our proposed renovations are very Spartan in their application. Like, we're looking at basically bare concrete floors and very, very straightforward working conditions. There's absolutely no glitz or glam involved with this renovation. It's basically just to bring it up to a reasonable standard for our staff. And further to that, I'll take any other questions you may have.
Mr. Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've been through that facility. Like, we could park a couple more trucks inside if we didn't have an office trailer taking up the one whole bay of the shop. And yes, if the decision is to put the whole east of Norfolk County in Villanova, the logic of that escapes me. To run from Villanova Yard down to Port Dover, Port Rydersea is probably a 25-minute trip. If they forget a shovel, that's like an hour-and-a-half round trip to go pick up a shovel. But if that's the long-term plan, then the work is required. If we're going to change the plan and put another yard back closer to Dover or somewhere in that area, that'd be a whole different story. But if the long-term plan is to keep that facility as operating the entire east side of Norfolk County, then it definitely needs to work. And yeah, unfortunately, when you start renovating a building, as soon as you open a wall, you've just doubled the price. I've been there, done that. So,
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Councillor Van Passen nailed it for me. I would like to see, in a perfect world, more public works facilities, smaller in scale, in our large communities where we're not putting staff commuting back and forth and driving vehicles back and forth and adding mileage and gas and so on and so forth back and forth. And additionally, when I looked at this, I thought, well, it's close to $200,000, and then in further conversations, someone put it into perspective to me, and I thought, well, that's actually pretty close to a house, the price of a house. I want to support our public works staff. I think that they should have proper services and amenities and washrooms and non-leaking roofs, but it's just quite a bit more over the expected budget amount. Thank you.
Councillor Hoffman, and then Mayor Chop.
Thank you, Chair. I'm listening to what my colleagues are saying, and to some regards, I see a bit of sense there. Not that you're nonsensical, but we do have so little in the northeast corner of Norfolk County, and I would like to advocate that we continue to keep some of our resources in the east part of the county, specifically the northeast. There is a large population there, and actually when I was looking through some of when we were going through the ward boundary numbers, with the exception of Ward 5, there's a fairly big disbursement. There's not that much of a disbursement between the populations when you're looking at your outlying areas and your hamlets. And Waterford, Ward 7 has quite a few. So I would think that in terms of the all Norfolk concept and the fact of, we just did discuss Dover for quite a while with Friday the 13th, and there's the uniqueness of Port Dover. And I advocate on behalf of our wards, Ward 7, that facility stay there, and there is quite a bit of potential for growth for that facility if necessary.
I assume you're going to move Is there another?
Mr. Chair, if I could just reply to that.
Mayor Chop.
Mr. Chair, if I could just reply
Yes.
to that? I was not advocating for closing the facility.
Okay.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify. Yeah.
Mayor Chop.
Well, I think Councillor Van Passen had a question. I'm just wondering, I mean, is that the long, do we have a plan of how we're looking at sort of making, and if that was the case, if we haven't decided on a plan yet, maybe there is an interim solution of, I mean, 200,000 would buy you a pretty, I mean, fancy trailer to buy, that could be moved to a new facility if it changed, or, you know, maybe there's some alternative in the interim until we actually come up with a concrete plan of what the future looks like. And I agree to keep Villanova also.
Van Passen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I might have to ask you or Councillor Columbus, because I don't think it's been that long since they made those adjustments and closed down some of the yards and shifted the service areas. That's only been a few years, so I'm assuming that's the beginning of a long term. So maybe I look to your guidance or your experience for an answer to that.
Councillor Columbus.
Well, I was going to chime in here. The reason that this facility is so deteriorated in the condition it's in, it's because it's been proposed over the past several councils, past several years, that this facility be shut down and amalgamated with the Simcoe office. But that has never happened. It's always been controversial because the workers out there want to be in the Villanova area. And that's probably the reason why we're having to put so much money into it now, because it's been neglected in the past. Just to bring up the deal.
Then Councillor Van Passen.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know I mentioned this to the Deputy Mayor earlier on this afternoon, that Townsend in itself is a large geographic area, definitely needs a yard there. We don't have one down in the big village of Port Ryershee, but there needs to be one up there, and the work needs to be done, and I would be happy to second Councillor Huffman making the motion to approve this budget amendment if she would do that. So.
I think I've already got it down, so you're okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, I have Councillor Hoffman moved and Van Passen is second. And I will read the recommendation that Stafford PW 19-40, award of tender PWFAC 19-06 renovations East Area Roads Operations Facility be received as information, and that staff be authorized to execute a contract with PK Construction Inc. to undertake the renovations as specified in tender PWFAC-1906 in the amount of $170,981 and plus HST. So all those in favor? So it's passed. Moving on to the next one. Staff report PW 1941, a re-award of contract for urban asphalt resurfacing. Where you go again?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to council, I am not asking for more money this time. If you want to cut right to the chase, if you jump to page 106, 107 of your agenda packages, you will see the site locations. This is our urban asphalt resurfacing program. What we are proposing to complete is a portion of Donnelly Drive South and a large portion of Victoria Street, essentially from Donnelly over to Norfolk. And then if you actually look on page, I believe that's 106, the nice picture of the marina. Part of our marina upgrades is through this contract. We're having some asphalt laid down in the marina area. You can see the Jack Mayhem Way, as well as up in the kind of northeast corner there, there's a large parking area which was proposed to be done. So this is just an award of contract for that urban asphalt program. And will point out again, we are within budget. And The one thing additionally to note to that is we did have a provisional item included in the contract, which was for the section of Bonnie Drive, which you can see on the map on page 106. This recommendation is not inclusive of that provisional item for Bonnie Drive to be resurfaced. I will gladly take any questions.
Any questions? Councillor Columbus?
Chairman, I'll put a motion on the floor to proceed past the hour at 9 o'clock.
It's already done.
Oh, is it?
Yes.
Did we do that? I was just talking to
Remember, we had about a
She
quarter
duped
to
me.
9, and we knew we were
She
going to
says-
go over 9, and we actually... You're too late.
She was telling me we didn't do it.
Okay. Yes?
I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Yes? Okay. What am I doing now? We're going to
Just a
move
vote.
this? The staff report, I've already talked about it, I think I
I'll
did.
just move the recommendation as printed.
Okay. All those in favor? Carried. Moving on to staff report ECS 1926. Read 2019 Extending Health and Dental Long-Term Disability, Life Insurance, and Accidental Death and Dismemberment Insurance Renewals. All yours.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, to Council, just as a quick refresher, a couple of months ago, we brought forward a report that identified to Council that staff, in working with our benefits consultants, had some concerns about our upcoming renewals as far as all those items identified by the Chair are concerned, and asking Council support to, as quickly as we can, have our benefits consultants and work with them and go to market and identify where there are vendors in the industry, in the market, that could provide us with some numbers of what we would be looking at from a renewal proposal. And I'll stop there and I'll pass it over to the gentleman to my right, who's our Manager of Organizational Health and Wellness, Trevor Meisner, to report on the outcomes of that process.
Thank you, Yakov. I'm pleased to provide you the report for the 2019 benefits renewals. As of July 1st, 2019, the organization's benefit plans are subject to renewal. The results of the marketing process performed by the benefits consultants were very positive. Not only did the benefit consultant meet the timelines required, the negotiated renewal would represent an overall 12% decrease to benefit premiums over the next year. This would equate to, as stated in the financial services comments, a favorable budget savings of $240,000 in 2019. Through the marketing process, the benefits consultant recommends maintaining the current benefit providers. In addition to the decrease in premiums, the current providers have offered to maintain the cost of the premiums for life insurance and AD&D for 3 years, long-term disability for 2 years, which will provide some cost stability in the area of benefit premiums for 2020 and to a lesser extent in 2021. Some further positive results contained in the report in terms of benefits cost were that this past year there was actually a 1.7% decrease in extended health care and dental benefit claims. And in addition, there was a 4.1% decrease in prescription drug claims. I'd like to thank Council for its support through this process, and I'm available for questions.
Any questions? Yes, Hoffman.
Thank you.
No, Councillor Hoffman, I'll do that.
Through you to Mr. Meisner. With the decrease in the extended, in the medication piece, would that be possibly because of the provincial plan that had individuals 25 and under receiving free drug coverage?
Through the chair, in consultation with our benefits consultant, that had very little effect when it was in place, and since then that's been discontinued. April, I
Yes,
believe.
it changed
Yeah.
in April
Yeah.
with the new.
So that had
new
very
government.
little effect. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Any other? Mayor Chop?
I'm just wondering, and maybe I'm missing it, how long are we looking at this? How many years, what's the new contract for?
Through the chair, we do the benefits renewal annually. It's at one year.
Just
But-
1 year,
But
okay.
they are providing us, the benefit providers are providing us a fixed cost for, in life insurance for an additional 2 years, and AD&D, and then long-term disability for an additional 1 year. They call them rate guarantees. That's what they're providing us in
Okay,
that.
so this would be coming forward then again around the same time next year? Is
Yes,
that- okay.
yes, it would. This report comes to council every year, right around this time.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Columbus and Councillor...
Mr. Chairman, I will move the recommendation as printed on page 113.
No? Taylor? You're moving it? Or, sorry, you're seconding it? Yes? Michele?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just a question for staff. What is the percentage that employees pay for the benefit package?
Through the chair, it actually varies. It depends. There's some that's 100% employer paid. There are others that are 80-20, and that's dependent on with the non-union staff and various collective agreements. So the dates kind of vary, and it's many of the collective agreements, and it's staff that started at a certain date pay 20%.
Thank you.
Okay. No other hands? That report ECS 1926, extend health and dental long-term disabilities, life insurance and accidental death and dismemberment, insurer renewals be received as information, and that staff be directed to retain the existing benefit providers as outlined in the report. Any questions? Mover and seconder, I have Columbus and Taylor. All those in favor? That is carried. Moving on to the next one, which is staff report ECS 19-27, reimbursement mileage rate for work-related travel, effective July 1st, 2019. Who's got that one? Over there? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to members of council, Mr. Sushchenkov and I are before you this evening to present the report on reimbursable mileage rate for work-related travel. The current rate used for mileage reimbursement is 45.5 cents per kilometer. The last time this was revised by council was in 2014, which means there hasn't been an increase or an adjustment to the mileage rate in over 5 years. A review of Norfolk County Council approved municipal comparator mileage rates and the best practices at various levels of government has determined that our current rate requires adjustment. Staff have reviewed a couple of options. We've looked at the CRA rates, but we found that there is a significant increase from 2018 rates at 55 cents, which jumped 3 cents in 2019 to 58 cents. And so we thought that was too high to bring forward to council as a recommendation. So you'll see through this report, staff are strongly recommending option number 3 of the report. In this option, staff have determined an appropriate rate by taking the average mileage rates paid by our 5 neighboring municipalities. So those 5 municipalities are Haldimand County, Brant County, the City of Brantford, Elgin County, and Oxford County. Based on this methodology, in 2019, we would see a mileage rate of 54 cents per kilometer. and we believe this provides for a fair and reasonable rate for mileage reimbursement. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Any questions from the committee? From what's Martin? Councilor Martin?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to staff, does the county currently have a policy that staff follow when they use their own vehicle versus a county vehicle?
Through the chair to Councillor Martin, yes, we have a reimbursable travel mileage policy that all staff are required to follow. And it outlines when you can collect mileage for what purposes and that sort of thing.
Nothing further? Councilor Van Passen, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've always had a problem with using averages from other municipalities to set anything, because that's an arbitrary number. It's made up. Like, at least the CRA numbers, they've calculated it out, whether you agree with them or disagree with them. You've calculated them. And, you know, like, is it possible to use, like, CRA has a rate of 58 and 52. One is for above 5,000 kilometers, one is below. And, you know, average those two numbers and use that. That's a real calculated number rather than just phoning the local municipalities and say, what are you charging this week? And we average it out and we come up with an arbitrary made up number that way. So, like, the one is based on logic and one is based on non-logic.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, I have a motion here, recommendation that staff report ECS 1927 reimbursement mileage rate for work-related travel effective July 2019 be received as information, and that council endorse option number 3 of this report, and further that as July 1st, 2019, every January thereafter, the pre-kilometer rate will be adjusted on an administrative base based on the methodology contained in option 3, and further that in special circumstances a car allowance may be approved at the discretion of the chief administrator officer and treasurer, and further that the approved 2019 levy and rated supported operating budget be amended by a total of $42,400 based on the projected financial impact option 3 at this report. Any questions? Movers? Okay, go ahead. Ian? Seconder? Taylor? Any questions? If not, all those in favor? It's carried. I think we have one left. Staff report DCS 1972, the Port Dover West Planning Area Secondary Plan Option Report. Yours? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Geisens. This report, DCS 1972, is a follow-up with regards to the Port Dover West Secondary Plan Area. Through council deliberations earlier this year, it was identified that $350,000 could be allocated with respect to a secondary plan for the Port Dover West area, with some financial contributions potentially by included property owners. Through some subsequent discussions, it's come to the understanding that through development charges and the information that's available, a maximum of $157,500 can be funded for the project. This is a substantial deviation from which was originally kind of identified for the project. And as a result, staff have put forward 6 potential options for council's consideration, and we are seeking direction from council on next steps in order to proceed potentially with the project. Based on the 6 recommendations that have been included, one is to seek additional reliance on external funding sources. review potential opportunities for grant funding, additional funding through the tax levy, postpone completion of the secondary plan from 2019. Option 5 is remove the requirement completely for a secondary plan, and this would require an official plan amendment. And the last option is complete the secondary plan, however, do it in 2 phases. This would not require an official plan amendment and would look at the property in 2 sections. Staff are recommending that options 1 and 6 be explored, so that would be reliance in inclusion of property owners with respect to completion of the secondary plan, as well as breaking the secondary plan into 2 phases. This approach is considered appropriate for the 2 phases, as the lands that are kind of more easily to be developed can move forward, and we can get the studies and the requirements moving forward on that portion. Those portions of lands would be kind of the lands on the north side of the area, and adjacent to Highway 6. The lands that are further south towards Radical Road and Nelson have a lot more impacts from environmental studies and that sort of factor. So it's considered that options 1 and 6 are the more appropriate approach, and we're seeking council's direction on that. And I'm happy to answer any other questions that you might have at this time. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Shannon. I guess my view on this stays the same as it did at budget deliberations. I don't see why the taxpayer should bear the cost of further development. I mean, we're seeing the situation in Port Dover. I keep getting emails from people, well, you know, I thought we collected all these development charges from these new homes. Why isn't the money there to expand the treatment facility? And so to go and now we're in a situation where we don't have enough water for development, and now we're going to go, and so there's going to be a cost to the taxpayers to deal with that situation. And now we're going to add on the cost of doing a secondary plan, so developers can again, you know, further increase their pocketbooks. And I'm just wondering if it wouldn't be prudent. I mean, certainly the opportunity for staff to explore, you know, external funding sources and grant funding, I mean, I think that should all be a given over the next couple months. But if it wouldn't be prudent to defer this until September, until we have a better idea of what's happening with the our plan for the water treatment facility in Port Dover.
Councillor Van Passen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember this spring we had at least one developer here willing to pay his fair portion of it, but I think they were talking about the part north of the rail bed, and that one to me does make the most sense. It really is geographically separated by that old rail bed, and that's where the main development would probably go first, on the north edge, and to do the secondary plan in 2 stages with financial input from the developers or the existing landowners. I don't see why we shouldn't investigate that possibility and move forward with that part. I doubt they're going to be in such a rush now that there's no water available in Dover, but at least we can enter into the discussions.
Go ahead.
Well, I guess further to Councillor Van Passen's point, I guess my only thing would be, as long as there is no impact to the levy, if the developers themselves are willing to fund it, then by all means. But I can't emphasize enough that I don't believe that taxpayers across Norfolk County should be funding this.
All right, go ahead.
Through you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the options that we're recommending to be put forward, options 1 would seek funding and contributions, as of maybe a better term, from the local property owners. Mr. Gasparini would be one of them who did speak at the the budget deliberations. And option 6, the option 6 would not impact the tax levy at this point. It would be funded through the development charges. It's just that the amount that can be funded through the development charges is reduced. So by breaking it into a smaller pieces, into 2 phases, we're taking less potential costs moving forward. So the $157,000 with potential contribution from the property owners would hopefully cover the studies that would need to be completed. And further to Councillor Van Passen's comments and Mayor Chop's comments about development in Port Dover, the secondary plan would take some time and a couple of years to theoretically get through the process. So the anticipation is that if we can start the secondary plan information and review at this point to get the planning and the foundations in effect, that by the time the capacities are available in the Port Dover treatment facilities, that these lands would be in a position where they could be developed.
Further, go ahead.
I agree with Ms. Van Dalen completely. I guess my point was just in terms of a couple months. I'm hoping that we might have an idea in a couple months of whether we're looking at a year or 2 years or, you know, what that sort of time horizon looks like. But I guess one final question would be, what level of council involvement occurs during the creation of the secondary plan? Just since we weren't here for the one for Simcoe.
Pardon me, through you, Mr. Chair. Council involvement would be through information reports and updates as we're going through the process. We'd be able to provide you kind of what studies are at and the involvement, so we would be able to keep you informed through the information reports through various milestones that could be identified with respect to council's direction.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mayor Chop, for mentioning that. This doesn't have to do necessarily with the direction of the report, more the content of the plan. Page 131, the last paragraph. I am deeply disturbed by the consideration of commercial happening there. So I look forward to further comments with staff, and if I can be involved at all in that process and provide input or collect data from community members, I am more than happy to do so. Thank you.
Okay. No other questions? I have a motion here that report DCS 19-72 be received as information, and that council direct staff to proceed with option 1 and option 6 as outlined in report DCS 19-72. Any questions? I mover and seconder.
Just like to make an amendment to that if I
Okay.
can, and that just to ensure that there is no impact, no levy impact.
No levy impact. Okay. I need a mover and a seconder. Who wants to move it? Council Martin. Seconder. Sorry. Go ahead.
Just add one other piece. I just also, option 2, the grant funding, that seems like that should be kind of a given that's in there. So if we could add option 2 to that as well.
Okay. Option 2.
No harm in trying.
Okay. I still need a seconder. Mayor Chop. All those in favor? That is carried. Now, are we going to deal with this notions? Notice of motion. Are there any? I don't see any. Other business? Because we're going to go back into, sorry?
I don't know, Councilor Van Passen, do you have a notice of motion?
You have one? Sorry. Huh?
I believe Councilor Van Passen has one, and he's going to seek committee's indulgence to waive the rules of order so it can proceed as a motion tonight.
That would be my intent, sir.
Do we do it now, or do we do it?
I can do it right now, Mr. Chairman. During our discussions last week on the Integrity Commissioner's supplementary report, we were under the impression that no penalty was to be imposed, and therefore, due to council's error, I would like to move that the mayor be reimbursed any salary withheld, because that has already taken place. I could get a seconder on that.
Go ahead.
I would just like to declare pecuniary interest here and
Okay. We have a mover and a seconder. Martin? Any questions? Go ahead.
Do we not first, through you, Mr. Chair, do we not first have to waive the rules of procedural order in order to entertain this motion?
Yes?
So the first step is to see if we have a two-thirds majority vote for that, and then if we do, then we can vote on the main motion.
Okay. You want to know how many are going to say yes or no, right? How many are in favor? Those against? It passes. Right? Isn't that what we're doing? Am I reading the wrong thing?
I believe I saw, maybe, this is a two-thirds to see if we proceed to consider the motion. I think I saw 6 hands, but do you want to do it again?
Let's do it again. Well, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just so everybody's clear, I don't want there to be any confusion. So you're asking right now for a vote to waive the procedural rules of order, which requires two-thirds, correct? Thank you.
Okay. Now, let's try it one more time. We need, do we have enough? Let's show hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We're there. So where do we go now? Oh, the motion's on the floor, yes. You need a seconder? Martin, and I had Chop, but she's gone out of this, so theoretically somebody wants to move second? No? Okay, Martin, I've got you as the moved, Van Passen, okay? All those in favor? You want some discussion? You can do that too, if you like.
Just want to check with the clerk to make sure we're able to do that as it sound. I don't know if that motion was helped by you at all. If it's worded properly, so it's gonna work the way it's intended.
Yeah. So the motion is just basically that the mayor be reimbursed any salary withheld, and so that will effectively ensure that what's currently in effect will be undone.
Councilor Michele, did you have something? Hoffman, Councilor Hoffman?
Okay, so just to clarify, so this does not directly contravene the Integrity Commissioner's recommendation? Can I get a clarification on this, please?
Through you, the chair. It's a tough question to ask. It reverses the Integrity Commissioner had delegated authority to put in the 10-day pay suspension. This reverses that decision, but then I'm also working on a staff report next week to remove the delegation of authority from the Integrity Commissioner. So I think there's a bigger issue here that is more related to the fact that council wasn't aware that they had this delegation to the Integrity Commissioner, and it is an unusual delegation of authority to Integrity Commissioner, so it does undo something, but I don't expect that it will result in any consequences, if that assists.
Further? Councilor, sorry?
Mr.
Yes?
Johnson wanted to speak there.
Thank you. Through the chair. One option council has is to have the reimbursement in the form of a grant back to the mayor, and it's not really reversing the decision, but it's more or less reimbursing the mayor through a grant process.
Councilor Van Passen.
Every once in a while, I do choose my words carefully. To refund the money would be to give it back. To reimburse means it's a different source reimbursing for the funding. We have met the requirements of the Integrity Commissioner, and now we'll be reimbursing, because that was my error when I made the motion last week, and I was unaware that staff worked very efficiently and did what they were supposed to do, and it was myself and, well, this council who supported the motion last week who were in error, and I will accept that I made an error, and hoping to make the mayor whole, keep the integrity commissioner happy, and move on with this whole subject, because I don't want to waste any more time with it.
So what do we do now? Are we going to do what basically, I guess I'm looking for what we need to do. Is it we're going to, sorry? Vote on that motion? Okay, can you read it one more time for me?
That the mayor be reimbursed any salary withheld.
All those in favor? That is carried, so we're done. Okay, now? Moving on to other business. Does anybody, because we are going to go, and I'm thinking after that we won't, we'll probably be asleep by the time that if we wait too long. So, other business. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Geisens. I'd just like to say that there are 14 candidates running to serve as board members of the Simcoe BIA. The election that's being held started yesterday on the 17th, and it will carry on to the 24th. The results will be announced on the 25th, and I'm very excited for this process.
Well, Michele, any other business?
No, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Hoffman, any other business?
Yes, I do. I have a couple things. I just wanted to make mention that this Saturday, June 22nd, from 1 to 4 p.m., an open house will be held at the Waterford Fire Hall to celebrate 2 longtime volunteer firefighters. Their total of years of combined service is 91 years. Firefighter Charlie Lemery with 48 years of service, and firefighter Dave Thompson with 43 years of service. They have served our county quite well and are staples in our community. So if you do have an opportunity, please stop by and offer your congratulations and thanks to these 2 fine gentlemen. And on a serious note, I've had complaints within the county of individuals cutting their grass and shooting the grass clippings onto the road. For those who are not aware, this is basically for motorcycles like driving on ice. So if we could please ask all residents of Norfolk County to please, whether you're in town, on country roads, wherever you may be, to not be putting your grass cuttings onto the road. It's quite dangerous and quite a liability. And on a more personal note, there's 2 more hours left of my daughter's birthday. So happy 20th birthday, Abby. Love you. Try and get home for a glass of wine before you go to bed.
Councillor Van Passen. Any other
Nothing
business?
tonight, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. 2 things. The Norfolk Haldeman Community Hospice Group is hosting an information event tomorrow night at the Port Dover Community Center from 7 till 8 p.m. And I wanted to give a special shout out to staff member Marie Steiner for her temporary road closure map in our information package for Canada Day in Port Dover. And then lastly, also in our information package, there's details on road repairs that will occur across the county mid-June, completed in the end of August. And in Port Dover, that includes St. Anne Street North and South, Scott Drive, Bowery Street, Black Creek Lane, and John Street. So thanks to Public Works staff.
Councillor Columbus, any other business?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think Ms. Shelley Darlington knew this question was coming. It's about POA outstanding monies that are owed to the county. Just wonder if we can get an update on where we're at with that as to our collections abilities and whether we are in fact breaking even on that facility at the RAD building with payback.
Go ahead, come to the...
Through the chair to Councillor Columbus. I don't have that information in front of me, but I will certainly be able to consult with the Director of Facilities responsible for the cost allocation at Robinson Administration Building and what the payback is in the POA area. So we'll follow up.
Thank you. Done, Councillor Columbus? Councillor Rabbit?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, tomorrow, Wednesday, June 19th, there will be a fundraising dinner held at Boston Pizza here in Simcoe for a young man named Andy Gorzo. Andy will be traveling to Portugal to represent Canada at the Dance World Cup, and after that he'll be heading to New York City for the American Dance Awards. Very happy for this young man and supporting him in his endeavor to represent Canada and Norfolk County abroad, and he will be having a fundraising dinner again that's taking place tomorrow at Boston Pizza. Doors open at 5 p.m. Tickets are available. You could contact the Gorzos through MyFM. They're available online. I could read out an email address. It's Gorzo, spelled Gorzo 12345 at gmail.com, or you could contact them directly by phone. It's 226-931-5452. And I just want to wish Andy all the best and let him know that we're all proud of him here in the county, and hopefully he doesn't break a leg.
I don't have any, and Councillor Mayor, you have the last. Go ahead.
Well, this is actually one of my favorite events in Norfolk County this weekend, put on by Scruton Marine, but the annual tug pull races are on Saturday, and there's a barbecue. The tug pull races, I believe, start in the morning, and actually, no, what was the first thing in the morning is in the fish containers, the fish tote races, followed by the tug pull races in the afternoon, and 100% of the donations go to Ronald McDonald House and Camp Trillium. And on another note, I've been wanting to say this thank you for a while, and I keep forgetting, but I had a constituent contact me about the roadside weeds, and I sent it on to Jason, and literally the next day she contacted me to tell me that the weeds were taken care of. So I told Jason that he could add Ditch Miracle Worker to his resume, but he told me that it was actually Chris Thompson and the West Area Roads crew, so a big thank you to them.
Thank you. Other business, we're done. Closed session. We have 2 further closed sessions items tonight. Sorry? There's 3? Well, it said 2 here, I'm sorry. Okay. Make it 3. Okay. I have a motion moved by, is this the one that I want? No, I got it here somewhere. Where did I put it? Right here. Sorry. Moved by Councillor Van Passen, seconded by Ian Rabbit, that the committee move into closed session at 10:10, based on that clock, p.m. Pursuant to section 2, to section 239(2) B, D, and K and the Municipal Act 2001 SOC 25 as the subject matter pertains to personal matters about identified individuals, including municipal or board employees, labor relations or employee negotiations, including communications necessary for that purpose, and a position, plan, procedure, criteria, or interest in the to be applied to any negotiation carried on or to be carried on behalf of the municipality of the local board. I think I got it this time. All those in favor? That is carried. I think it's a little too late for me. There you go. All right, now let's go. What else? Huh? I'm not sure. Huh? Oh, I bet. I don't. So we got 3 more of these. Huh? Oh, yeah. Hopefully the next 2.
He's so good looking.
somewhere?
No, it's just a verbal one, Columbus.
Okay. Moved, seconder. All those in favor? Have a good night's sleep.
Thank you. Have a good night.
That's what we get. That's what we get.
Okay.